This is the daily RAMBAM reading according to the Chabad learning program. They have a system where they read one chapter a day or 3 chapters a day, and they finish in 3 years or 1 year, respectively. This year, unbeknownst to me, and I just was thinking about it over the past several months, where are they up to in the cycle? Meaning, like, when are they going to finish? And just lo and behold, I saw it a few different places. They announced that they did the seam on the Rambam, and that both of them came together in unison. The 3 and the 1, and the 1 and the 3. And this year is very special because of that. So, and I heard about it on the day that they finished, or like the next day. So I immediately got on board on the. I chose the one chapter a day. Okay, so we're holding an introduction. We just started. So yesterday was the introduction. The day before that was the completion. Yesterday was the introduction, part 1. This is the introduction of the Rambam, the Maimonides, Rav Moshe ben Maimon, in the Chabad learning program, doing the 1 chapter a day program. Okay. Thus, the source of, introduction part 2. Thus, the source of all these people's knowledge is God, the Lord of Israel. All the sages who are mentioned were the leaders of the generations. Among them were heads of academies, heads of the exile, and members of the great Sanhedrin. Together with them, in each generation, there were thousands and myriads that heard their teachings. Ravina and Rav Ashi were the final generation of the sages of the Talmud. Rav Ashi composed the Babylonian Talmud in Shinar, approximately 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan composed the Jerusalem Talmud. The intent of both the Talmuds is to elucidate the words of the Mishnah, to explain its deeper points, and to relate the new matters that were developed by each court from the era of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that's Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, until the composition of the Talmud. From the entire body of knowledge stemming from the 2 Talmuds, the Tosefta, the Sifra, the Sifri, can be derived the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, the liable and those who are free of liability, the invalid and the valid, as was received in tradition, one person from another, in a chain extending back to Moses at Sinai. Also, the sources mentioned above relate those matters which were decreed by the sages and prophets in each generation in order to build a fence around the Torah. We were explicitly taught about this practice by Moses, as implied by Leviticus 18:30, and you shall observe my precepts, which can be interpreted to mean make safeguards for my precepts. Similarly, it includes the customs and ordinances that were ordained and practiced in each generation according to the judgment of the governing court of that generation. It is forbidden to deviate from these decisions, as implied by Deuteronomy 17:11. Do not deviate from the instructions they give you, that they will give you left or right. It also includes marvelous judgments and laws which were not received from Moses, but rather were derived by the courts of the later generations based on the principles of biblical exegesis. The elders of those generations made these decisions and concluded that this was the law. Rav Ashi included in the Talmud this entire body of knowledge stemming from the era of Moses, our teacher, until his own era. The sages of the Mishnah also composed other texts to explain the words of the Torah. Rabbi Yehoshua, the disciple of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, composed an explanation of the book of Genesis. Rabbi Yishmael composed an explanation beginning at "These are the names." Ve'ela Shmot. Ve'ela Shmot. I wonder why the Rambam says Eila Shmot and not Ve'ela Shmot. Eila Shmot. Okay. Rabbi Yishmael composed I think it's the Mechilta. Rabbi Yishmael composed an explanation beginning at these are the names and in the beginning of the book of Exodus until the conclusion of the Torah. This is called a Mechilta. Rabbi Akiva also composed a Mechilta. Other sages of the following generations composed other collections of the interpretations of verses, Midrashim. All of these works were composed before the Babylonian Talmud. Thus, Ravina Ravashi and their colleagues represent the final era of the great sages of Israel who transmitted the oral law. They passed decrees, ordained practices, and put into effect customs. These decrees, ordinances, and customs spread out among the entire Jewish people in all the places where they lived. After the court of Rav Ashi composed the Talmud and completed it in the time of his son, the Jewish people became further dispersed throughout all the lands, reaching the distant extremes and the far-removed islands. Strife sprung up throughout the world, and the paths of travel became endangered by troops. Torah study decreased, and the Jews ceased entering their yeshivot in the thousands and myriads, as was customary previously. Instead, individuals, the remnants whom God called, would gather in each city and country, occupy themselves in Torah study, and devote themselves to understanding the texts of the sages and learning the path of judgment from them. Every court that was established after the conclusion of the Talmud, regardless of the country in which it was established, issued decrees, enacted ordinances, and established customs for the people of that country or those of several countries. These practices, however, were not accepted throughout the Jewish people because of the distance between their different settlements and the disruption of communication between them. Since each of these courts were considered to be individuals, and the High Court of 71 judges had been defunct for many years before the composition of the Talmud, people in one country could not be compelled to follow the practices of another country, nor is one court required to sanction decrees which another court had declared in its locale. Similarly, if one of the Gaonim interpreted the path of judgment in a certain way, while the court which arose afterward interpreted the proper approach to the matter in a different way, the opinion of the first need not be adhered to absolutely. Rather, whichever position appears to be correct, whether the first or the last is accepted. So it wasn't, I don't understand this. So it's not a direct line. It had to do with how you interpreted it. So it's not a direct line. People want to say that Torah Sheba'al Peh is a direct line, link to link. No, it's over time the interpretations change. RAMBAM says it right here. It's good to know. Okay.